Good morning, class. Alright, today we'll be taking a look at literature theories, more specifically New Historicism.
Hey, what's that?
Alright, so, does anyone have a general idea of what New Historicism is?
No.
No?
No idea.
Ryan, do you want to take a little crack at it?
Is it maybe how we analyze the culture and the setting of what the book is being placed in? So I guess if we looked at how Harry Potter is, are we looking at a modern setting? Kind of like that?
Great guess. Really, you're coming on to more of the general common misconception about New Historicism. So, a lot of people would follow along here thinking that we kind of look at the novels society, like how the author built up the setting of time period, people, culture and beliefs. But in New Historicism, we want to take a broader look. So we're doing more of a jigsaw puzzle. So where we look at maybe the novels perspective, and then we look at the authors, and then we even look at any other readers including critics and stuff like that. So we look at all these different sections of time that a novel could have taken place in, and the author could have taken place in, and the reader could have taken place in. So these three separate things kind of form together to make a completed puzzle of what the novel kind of represents in its themes.
So would a better example be The Crucible, where it was set during the Salem witch trials, and the playwright Arthur Miller was living during, I believe, the 1950s. That's when he published the book. So it was during the Red Scare. Could you see parallels between what he was writing and what he was living? So during the time when he was living, the Red Scare was when there was harsh accusations towards people that were believed to be communists. And then in the book, you can see harsh accusations of people being witches. So would you see parallels to that? So McCarthyism during their era, and then all the witch trials during the Crucible era.
Yep, that's a perfect way that New Historicists would put it. Take a look at how a novel would work in literature. So a lot of it is just keep on focusing on the bits fitting together and seeing how they mash up. And that's one of the things that you want to look at when you're a New Historicist. Is look at how, as you read, ask yourself these questions such as while I'm reading, you look at, are there any of these characters, events, actions that taking place here that could have happened during the author's time, even if he didn't live during the novel's settings? Or is there language that has a different meaning today than it was supposed to have in the novel? Things like that kind of help you push you along, thinking along the lines of all the many perspectives that you want to take as a New Historicist.
So it's kind of like a jigsaw, that's what you're saying.
Yeah, perfect, like a jigsaw. Now, let's put this into practice. So anyone have a novel that we recently read that you can think of?
Put me in, coach.
Alright, Vanessa?
So, Huckleberry Finn.
Huckleberry Finn, great choice. So, Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. So, any ideas of what kind of elements of the novel that actually happened during the author's time?
Well, when the novel was written, it was written after the Civil War. And in the novel, it addresses the issue of slavery and how the African Americans were being displayed as less than human beings. So during his time, they weren't necessarily given the political and social rights they were supposed to be given.
So if you can look deeper, their reasoning, I think their reasoning was for why that was happening to them, their mistreatment. I think it could be led back to their ideals of superstitions. So during the novel's setting, Jim always had these weird superstitions. For example, when Tom and Huck played a trick on him, and then he believed it was like a witch doing tricks to him. I guess you could see that he was using that as a reasoning for why he was being mistreated during the time period. And then if you looked at the author's perspective, I think he could kind of hint on it as well, that that was what he was realizing about their time period. And as readers, we can fully see from our perspective that it wasn't actually superstitions, but actually, or crazy nonsense from the novel's perspective of white people. but from our perspective, it could be seen as a way for them to cope with their mistreatment.
Yep, great. And then, does any of the language, like any of the words that Jim said or the society said, do any of those words kind of seem different now?
I guess the big one would be the racial slur nigger.
Ooh.
Back then, it could be seen as a very offensive word, but it is very commonly used, and I guess people saw it as perfectly fine to be used. However, during the author's period, during his lifetime, he also saw broad use of the word, and it was perfectly fine. But if we were to look at the present, at our time period, when we're looking at the book, our interpretation of the word is that it's a very negative connotation and that it really shouldn't be used as a derogatory term towards the people that it was used towards.
Yep, exactly. So like how language can differ throughout the time, that it changes, and like some of the elements of the novel. So besides the African American aspect of Huckleberry Finn, do you see any other sort of culture clash that has been changed throughout the time?
Well, when in the beginning of the book, Huck kept getting told by Miss Watson that he should pray for what he wants. However, when he tells her that he's not getting what he wants by praying, she calls him foolish, which shows the hypocrisy of religion and how one should do what he wants to get or what he needs.
So it's basically a different view of how religion worked during the time period, right?
Yes.
So during the novel's setting, religion was more widely used and spoken about, as you can see by Miss Watson's use of the language towards how she worked in the household. And I guess this is similar to how it was during the author's time period, how religion played a large role through people's lives. But I believe in today's society, religion isn't as large of a role overall to people. It's more of an after effect of how you should carry about yourself. I think that makes sense, does it? What do you think?
I think it makes sense too.
Okay.
Alright, so now I got religion under there. One of the things you didn't point out was like women. What about the women culture, like back then, like their stereotypes or like their general, like what society usually saw upon them? Vanessa?
I have something to say.
Alright.
So going back to religion, Huck also has a moral dilemma in the middle of the book where he wonders about whether he should write to Miss Watson about Jim's location or keep adventuring with Jim. So he thought that the right choice was to write to Miss Watson and take away Jim's freedom, and that if he continued adventuring with Jim, he would be making the wrong decision. But looking at it from the present, it seems like it would be more moral to continue adventure with Jim and not take away his freedom than turn him into Miss Watson.
Okay, I can see how that relates to differences in how we perceive morally right or what's right thing to do for the past and the present. But I think we should also look about how it affected the cultures or the roles of the people during the time period. So what Gordon was hitting on, our teacher, our beloved teacher was hitting on, women's expectations. So in that one scene, I believe when Huck was portraying a woman, or disguised as a woman, he tried to show that he was very physically weak and that he was very adept at household chores. And it could also be seen in Miss Watson's personality, where she's just an old maid, where her only duty is to care for Huck, and there's nothing really beyond that. So I guess it could also be similar to the author's time period, where the book was written in the late 1800s, so women's roles were pretty similar during the time period. And I guess from our perspective, from our perspective, women's expectation are equal to men, and compared to the past is vastly different.
Yep.
I also remember that the author's wife was a sickly woman, so she was actually physically weak, and he probably showed how she was like through Miss Watson.
So
as
it was
well.
like an influence. Oh, that makes sense.
Alright, so I think you guys are getting an idea. Like going up again with the women we just talked about, like how at the time in the novel that women were considered like beneath men and that like they had a poor view that they were weak and like they needed the man's help. And then moving on to Mark Twain's time, that it improved a little bit, if you could say that, but it was still a little bit different. And then now, today in modern society, we can even look back and we can see the difference, how much that societies have changed over the time, that we see women as equals, like they've gained their suffrage, that they're completely equal to what we have. So as New Historicism, we want to keep making those kind of comparisons to see how like time evolves and how we can compare to them. So I'm guessing you got the main idea. This will be on the test, so class is about over.
Wait, when's the test?
Yes.
Don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it.
What do you mean?